Big news for Ferrari. A new aerodynamic upgrade package makes them 0.3 seconds faster than McLaren. This is probably the first time you're hearing about this news, so I urge you to stay until the end before talking about it with your friends, because every detail matters. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. Everything about the 2024 Formula One season feels different. Not just faster. Not just more competitive. Different in its intensity, in the way every race weekend seems to be surrounded by a storm of tension, speculation, and seismic shifts. Teams are no longer simply reacting to race results. They are preparing for battles that extend far beyond the next Grand Prix. Decisions made on a Friday afternoon during a practice session now carry consequences that ripple all the way into 2026. The pressure is not just to perform, but to evolve, instantly, ruthlessly, and without hesitation. At the center of this storm is Ferrari, a team that doesn't just represent a constructor, but a legacy. And that legacy has been under siege for years. But something has shifted this season. Bahrain wasn't a win, but it was a signal. A shift in posture. The car looked sharp, the upgrades weren't cosmetic, and for the first time in a long while, there was a sense that Ferrari wasn't just reacting to the championship, it was preparing to shape it. Their new floor concept was more than just a tweak, it represented a philosophy shift. Engineers working behind the scenes revealed that this floor alone delivered measurable performance gains. It didn't vault them to the top, but it gave them traction in a field that's been pulling away. That floor, however, tells only part of the story. The real issue lies beneath the surface. Ferrari's car is fundamentally brilliant, but critically flawed. A design built to operate in an extremely narrow window, one that requires the car to run low to the ground to generate peak downforce. And they can't. Not consistently. Not without triggering porpoising or risking mechanical failure. Insiders report they're losing up to 20 points of downforce due to having to raise the ride height for reliability and structural integrity. That number alone is shocking. But when translated into lap time, up to 0.4 per lap, it becomes devastating. It is, by every metric, the single largest performance bottleneck currently affecting any front-running team. It's not something a new wing will fix. It's not something that can be masked with setup changes. It is structural. And that means the only solution is either a major redesign, or a complete change of technical philosophy, both of which are incredibly difficult to pull off under the financial and time constraints of the current regulations. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. While Ferrari grapples with engineering dilemmas, McLaren is quietly putting together one of the most impressive mid-term transformations in modern F1 history. This is not a team relying on surprise wet weather performances or pit lane chaos. Their progress is deliberate, methodical, and frighteningly efficient. Their wind tunnel data is aligning with real-world performance almost perfectly, a benchmark of engineering excellence. The car is consistent across a range of circuits. It's gentle on tires, but aggressive through the corners. It's responsive without being unpredictable. And it's fast. Very fast. In particular, the way it carries speed through medium-speed corners has left rival teams studying onboard footage with quiet concern. And at the heart of this resurgence is a driver pairing that is perhaps the most balanced on the grid. Lando Norris is finally stepping into the role many believed he was destined for, a lead driver who combines speed with racecraft and maturity. Oscar Piastri, on the other hand, is delivering performances that go beyond rookie promise. He's executing laps with the precision of a veteran and has emerged as a quiet assassin, capitalizing on every opportunity. There is no internal politics. No destructive rivalry. Just a relentless push toward excellence. And the result is a team that is not only executing flawlessly, but evolving at an almost alarming rate. While McLaren builds and Ferrari recalibrates, Red Bull remains the standard. But even here, the foundation is beginning to wobble. The car is still dominant on paper. The results are still strong. But whispers from within the paddock are growing louder. Flexi-wing accusations that were once dismissed as petty complaints are now being taken seriously by the FIA. Technical inspectors are reportedly preparing a series of revised load tests and compliance procedures, aimed squarely at curbing the aerodynamic elasticity that Red Bull may have been exploiting to devastating effect. Engineers from rival teams have begun compiling video evidence and telemetry analysis to support their claims, and the governing body is responding. If the crackdown materializes as expected, with enforcement beginning around the Spanish Grand Prix, Red Bull could find itself needing to redesign key aerodynamic elements in season. And while the reigning champions have the resources and talent to respond quickly, even a minor disruption to their development flow could present a golden opportunity for rivals. This is not a sport that forgives hesitation. A two-race window where Red Bull underperforms could be all it takes for another team to close the gap, and momentum in F1 is notoriously difficult to regain once lost. Beyond the race results and aerodynamic debates, a deeper war is unfolding, one that concerns 2026 and the future of Formula One itself. The new engine regulations are no longer a distant concept, they are an approaching storm. Every team is already allocating resources, talent, and simulation hours to prepare for a power unit landscape that will be radically different. For some teams, this means a quiet withdrawal from the current championship fight. Mercedes, for example, has noticeably slowed its development pace. Some believe this is a tactical decision. The team, already aware that it cannot challenge for this year's title, is shifting its energy toward dominating the next era. That means fewer upgrades now, but potentially a massive leap forward 2 seasons from now. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. Other teams, however, are already feeling the strain. Aston Martin's trajectory has stalled. Their early promise has faded, and internal frustrations are beginning to leak out. Lawrence Stroll's patience is not infinite, and with Fernando Alonso's future uncertain, the team may face a winter of difficult decisions. Meanwhile, Audi's entrance into the sport, via Sauber, is not going smoothly. Timelines have slipped. Recruitment targets have been missed. And the power unit, once thought to be ahead of schedule, now appears to be lagging behind. For a project that promised to shake up the sport, the current situation feels more like a warning sign than a revolution. Everywhere you look, the tension is mounting. Driver contracts are in flux. Team principals are locking horns behind closed doors. Engine departments are working through the night to chase gains that might never materialize. And in the background, the FIA continues to issue technical directives that could, at any moment, reconfigure the competitive hierarchy. This season is not about domination. It's about survival. It's about risk. It's about knowing when to push, when to hold, and when to reinvent everything. Each team is now playing a different game, on a different timeline, with different stakes. Some are chasing every point as if it's their last. Others are thinking 3 years ahead. But none of them can afford to stop moving. Not for a single moment. And that's what makes this year extraordinary. Not the lap times. Not the championship lead. But the sense that every corner, every decision, every tenth of a second could trigger a chain reaction that reshapes not only the season, but the very future of Formula One. In Woking, something is happening that few predicted with this level of intensity. McLaren has moved past the point of just being impressive, they're now terrifyingly competent. The kind of threat that doesn't scream for attention, but forces you to watch. Not with theatrics, but with execution. Week by week, they're evolving into the team everyone secretly fears. The paddock isn't openly saying it yet, but it's in the air. You can feel it. And it all starts with 2 drivers whose chemistry and contrast are turning out to be the perfect storm. Lando Norris has matured into a racer who no longer second-guesses himself. He's not just quick, he's sharp. Calculated. His decision-making on race day is approaching elite territory. When he attacks, it's cold. When he defends, it's clinical. And when he needs to wait, he waits without losing focus. There's a layer of mental toughness now that was missing before. He stopped driving like someone with something to prove and started driving like someone who knows he belongs in the conversation with the very best. On the other side of the garage, Oscar Piastri is writing his own narrative with precision and quiet confidence. He's not loud. He doesn't have to be. He simply shows up and performs. His qualifying laps are consistently near the limit, but never desperate. His spatial awareness in tight racing situations is unnerving for someone so early in their F1 career. He doesn't panic. He calculates. And what's becoming clear is that he doesn't see himself as a support act. He's there to win. Not just in a few years. He believes it can happen now. And yet, for all their brilliance, the car they're driving has a flaw. Not a minor one, either. The MCL-38 is phenomenal in corners that require commitment, downforce, and bravery. It thrives in complex sectors where other cars hesitate. But when the track stretches into long straights, the McLaren is exposed. It drags. Literally. While others slice through the air, this car hits resistance. The DRS opens, and rivals like Ferrari or even Mercedes use that slingshot effect to make passes that feel inevitable. On circuits like Jeddah, this becomes a serious vulnerability. And it's one that can't be masked by talent alone. Norris and Piastri can battle, but they can't defy physics. What makes this even more fascinating is what's happening in Brackley. Mercedes, a team that spent 2 seasons lost in a fog of their own making, has found its way out. The mistakes are in the past. The confusion is gone. What remains is focus. The W15 is not the fastest car on the grid, but it may be the most consistent. A car that doesn't surprise its drivers. A car they can trust. The kind of machine that might not dominate headlines, but is always close enough to ruin someone else's race. And leading that charge is George Russell. No longer the promising future, now the commanding present. His performance in Bahrain was a statement. Not just because of the result, but because of how he earned it. With systems failing around him, he kept pushing. DRS issues, steering glitches, power concerns, it didn't matter. He adapted, recalculated, and delivered under pressure. That is the DNA of a team leader. And Mercedes knows it. Discussions behind closed doors are accelerating. A long-term contract is on the table. Not as a courtesy. As a necessity. Russell has become the emotional anchor of the team, but he's not the only piece they're investing in. Andrea Kimi Antonelli is not just a project. He's a plan. The Italian teenager is being prepared for the top tier with a level of intensity that suggests his debut is not far off. Insiders are pointing to 2025. The succession strategy is already in motion. Mercedes is not just rebuilding, they're preparing for domination again, and they're doing it with a clarity they haven't had in years. As all of this unfolds, there's another storyline quietly building pressure, and it's centered around the driver who, until recently, seemed like the most immovable figure in the sport. Max Verstappen. His dominance made Red Bull untouchable. His synergy with the team was the kind of relationship that only comes once in a generation. But now, the dynamic is shifting. Not because of pace, though that's become less secure, but because of what's happening behind the scenes. Red Bull, once a unified empire, is fracturing. Christian Horner's investigation has created turbulence that isn't going away. Helmut Marko, once a fixture, is facing an uncertain future. Power unit reliability, long a strength, is now a source of anxiety. Inside the camp, voices are conflicting. The atmosphere has changed. And Verstappen is watching it all very closely. Reports of a performance clause in his contract have gone from rumor to legitimate concern for Red Bull. If Verstappen is not in the top 3 of the standings by the summer break, he may have the option to walk away. Not as a dramatic gesture, as a contractual reality. And the terrifying part for Red Bull is that this isn't fantasy anymore. The team has dropped points. The grid is closing in. And the political distractions are growing louder by the day. Other teams have already begun planning. Quiet inquiries. Contingency strategies. Mercedes is monitoring. Ferrari is not far behind. Aston Martin, flush with ambition and funding, is assessing their own ceiling. Verstappen is the ultimate prize. If he's even partially available, the entire competitive map of Formula One changes overnight. Nothing about this season is stable. Every race is a referendum on momentum. Every session carries implications that stretch beyond the weekend. Driver futures, team leadership, engine programs, they're all in play. The track action is only half the story. Behind the garage doors, decisions are being made that could define the next decade of the sport. This is not just racing anymore. It's a chessboard of shifting loyalties, fragile contracts, rising stars, and legacy reputations. The battles being fought aren't just for trophies. They're for control. And the next move could come from anywhere. If the first chapters of this season are any indication, Formula One in 2024 is no longer about domination. It's about survival, reinvention, and the quiet wars happening in every corner of the paddock. No one is safe. No outcome is guaranteed. And every lap carries more weight than anyone wants to admit. What if Max Verstappen truly walked away from Red Bull? That possibility, once dismissed as tabloid fodder, now lingers in every quiet conversation behind closed doors. The idea of the sport's most dominant driver abandoning the empire that has revolved around him for nearly a decade is no longer fantasy, it's strategy. Inside Red Bull, the fractures are real. Leadership conflicts, shifting allegiances, and increasing political noise have transformed what was once a perfectly synchronized machine into a system under pressure. Verstappen, known for his precision and intolerance for chaos, is watching all of it closely. He doesn't make impulsive moves, but when he acts, the sport bends to his will. If he leaves, it won't be for headlines or nostalgia. It will be because the vision no longer matches the ambition. The most obvious destination? Mercedes. Not because it's easy, but because it's calculated. Toto Wolff has always positioned himself as a long-term thinker, someone who builds dynasties rather than just winning streaks. Since Lewis Hamilton announced his departure, Wolff has shifted gears. There's a new blueprint, George Russell as the foundation, Kimi Antonelli as the future. But Max Verstappen changes everything. He doesn't fit into plans, he becomes the plan. Conversations between Wolff and Jos Verstappen have moved past casual exchanges. These are strategic meetings, layered with meaning. Mercedes has resources, legacy, and an open door. The question isn't whether Verstappen wants to win. He already does. The real question is whether he wants to dominate in a second environment, reshape another team in his image, and leave a legacy that even Hamilton couldn't touch. But bringing Verstappen to Mercedes isn't without consequence. It risks alienating Russell, a driver who has bled silver since day one. It threatens the debut timeline of Antonelli, the Italian prodigy Mercedes has invested so heavily in. It means breaking a system carefully built over several seasons. Yet dynasties aren't forged through caution. They're carved out of bold decisions, the kind that reshape the competitive landscape for years. If Wolff makes the call, and Verstappen answers, the shockwaves won't stop at the grid. Every team will feel the ripple effect. McLaren, meanwhile, lurks with quiet ambition. They've executed one of the most impressive technical turnarounds in recent memory. Their evolution isn't cosmetic, it's structural. Andrea Stella has built something serious. The infrastructure upgrades, the aggressive in-season development, the raw pace, all of it screams readiness. Lando Norris is already a star. Oscar Piastri is sharpening his blade with every race. But add Verstappen to that mix, and suddenly McLaren becomes terrifying. The risk? Timing. They're not quite there. A title run still feels a season away. And Verstappen isn't waiting. He's hunting legacies, not building dreams. McLaren might be the future, but Verstappen operates in the now. Beyond the paddock politics, a more profound shift is quietly unfolding. Saudi Arabia's growing grip on Formula One is no longer speculative, it's visible. The kingdom has already transformed the Jeddah Grand Prix into a global spectacle. But that was only the beginning. Plans are accelerating for a second race and, more controversially, for the introduction of a Saudi-owned Formula One team. The logic is simple. Aramco's deep integration into the sport has paved the way. Their investment in Aston Martin was never just financial, it was strategic. While rumors initially suggested a full takeover of the Silverstone-based team, the narrative has changed. Saudi Arabia doesn't want to buy a team. It wants to build one. A brand, a symbol, a machine built entirely in its image. The FIA is quietly receptive. A 12th team means new markets, increased reach, and unprecedented commercial potential. But the established teams aren't celebrating. Prize money dilution is the immediate concern, but it runs deeper than finances. A new team backed by limitless resources changes the political balance. It disrupts existing power structures. It brings influence that cannot be ignored. Resistance is inevitable. But money talks. And Saudi money doesn't whisper, it roars. Meanwhile, buried under the bigger stories is Alpine, a team that began the season drowning in dysfunction. Technical exits, boardroom instability, and a lack of direction made them look like an implosion in progress. But amid the wreckage, Jack Doohan is rewriting his narrative. Thrown into the deep end with expectations at rock bottom, he responded with grit. Bahrain was a turning point, not a miracle, but a message. His pace wasn't world-beating, but it was stable. His decisions were measured. He looked like he belonged. A better timed safety car, and he might have walked away with points. Alpine noticed. The internal chatter shifted. What was once a 6-race trial has become something more open-ended. His future isn't secure, but it's no longer hopeless. That shift puts Pierre Gasly in an uncomfortable position. His performances, already under scrutiny, are now being directly compared to a teammate who wasn't even supposed to last past spring. The dynamic inside Alpine has changed. Pressure no longer flows downward, it loops around, unpredictable and ruthless. Every qualifying session, every on-track battle, now feels like an audition. The team may be stabilizing on paper, but the fight for survival is just beginning. The grid itself has become an anomaly. Every team has scored points. Every race has delivered surprises. This is the closest the field has been in years, not just in pace, but in possibility. Haas, once written off as perennial underdogs, have found rhythm. Williams, with minimal resources, are clinging to relevance through Albon's brilliance. Even Alpine, once mocked, have begun to resemble a functioning race team. This isn't parity. This is revolution. But revolutions are fragile. The 2026 regulation changes are looming, and with them, the return of separation. Development priorities are already shifting. Top teams are quietly pulling resources from the current season. Some are sacrificing performance now to dominate later. The gap will return. And when it does, this moment of unpredictability will fade. It will become legend, not reality. Right now, Formula One lives in a rare state of balance. One where talent can disrupt wealth. Where strategy can outpace power. Where every mistake matters, and every triumph feels earned. But make no mistake, this balance won't hold. And when it breaks, those who plan for the long game will rise, while others disappear into the rearview mirror. If you want a version of this as a voiceover script or tailored for YouTube pacing and narration style, I can format that next. Something is shifting in Formula One, and you can feel it, not just in the paddock or the press conferences, but deep in the rhythm of every race weekend. You watch a session, and there's tension in the air that doesn't go away when the flag drops. You hear the engineers on the radio, and the comm tones feel strained, like they know something we don't. You see the drivers walking through the grid, sunglasses on, smiles forced, each one carrying secrets heavier than their helmets. This isn't just another season. This is a storm forming in plain sight, and everyone is pretending it's just a passing cloud. Some cars look faster. Some teams appear confident. But underneath all of it, no one truly knows what's coming next. That's what makes this moment so intoxicating. Ferrari's pace looks real. They've corrected mistakes, trimmed inefficiencies, and come out swinging. But can they truly survive the full season without imploding from within? Because talent and raw speed are not their problems. It never has been. Their greatest rival has always been themselves: strategy errors, internal power struggles, inconsistent decision-making under pressure. And yet, something feels different. This isn't the desperate, fragile Ferrari we've seen collapse after 2 or 3 solid results. This feels more grounded, more ruthless. But how long can they keep this composure before the weight of expectation cracks it open again? Meanwhile, the silence coming out of Mercedes is more terrifying than any bold prediction. There are no grand statements. No big declarations. Just cold, calculated development. The kind of work done in simulation rooms and long after the lights go out at the factory. They've tasted dominance. They know what it takes. They know how to come back from the edge of irrelevance, because they've done it before. Every time you count them out, they find something. Some upgrade, some strategy tweak, some tiny adjustment that flips the balance. And when that moment arrives, they don't just join the fight, they set it on fire. But the center of the grid's drama, undeniably, is Red Bull. Max Verstappen is driving like a man who has nothing left to prove, but everything left to protect. He's brutal, precise, mechanical in his perfection. But for the first time in years, you get the sense that something inside the team isn't aligned. The air around Christian Horner feels heavy. The smiles look rehearsed. The unity that used to make Red Bull unbeatable now seems like a story they keep repeating, trying to convince the world, and maybe themselves, that nothing's wrong. But the whispers won't stop. The tension behind the scenes is mounting. And Max, who built his empire on loyalty and performance, might be the first one to walk away if the structure starts to crumble. Because when you've reached the top, every step you take isn't about climbing, it's about not falling. And then there's the quiet storm no one's fully acknowledged yet. George Russell. Consistent. Fast. Growing more confident with every lap. He doesn't need to beat Hamilton in headlines. He's beating him in data, in racecraft, in the subtle moments that define a championship mindset. No tantrums. No politics. Just performance. He's not chasing legacy, he's building his own. And while everyone's attention stays fixed on the bigger names, Russell keeps stacking results, refining his approach, waiting for that perfect intersection of timing and machinery. Because when that comes, and it will, he won't ask for permission. He'll take it. This grid is not stable. It's an ecosystem in flux. New deals are being signed behind closed doors. Engineers are switching teams before the season ends. Drivers are negotiating futures while pretending to focus on the present. Every decision made right now has ripple effects that will stretch into the next 5 years. And it's not just about who wins a race. It's about who controls the narrative. Who shapes the power structures. Who outlasts the chaos while quietly feeding it. We're watching history try to write itself in real time, but the ink hasn't dried. Anything can happen, and everything might. There is no safety in predictions anymore. No guarantee that past success means future dominance. Not when every race brings with it a new scandal, a new breakthrough, a new twist that forces everyone to adapt or fall behind. This is Formula One stripped down to its rawest form: ambition versus precision, politics versus performance, loyalty versus legacy. And now, all of it moves to Jeddah. The walls are tight. The speeds are terrifying. The margin for error is gone. This track doesn't forgive. It doesn't flatter. It reveals. If there are cracks in a team's unity, they'll widen. If there's doubt in a driver's mind, it'll show. If someone's been hiding pace or problems, everything will be exposed under the lights. This isn't just the next stop on the calendar. This is the circuit that separates contenders from pretenders. And it's coming fast. So if you think you've seen it all, if you believe the biggest surprises are already behind us, just wait. Because this season isn't even close to settling. The real story is still unfolding. And by the time the checkered flag falls, everything you thought you knew about this championship could be completely rewritten. This isn't the calm before the storm. This is the storm. And it's only just begun.